And it hasn't changed too dramatically in, my 17 years or so in the industry, but it has evolved a lot, obviously. So now, after the pandemic, virtual events are not the one dominant thing, of course, but they still exist. A lot of companies obviously saw how easy it was to, book a speaker maybe for an ERG or, an employee group that isn't the entire company, and they've got people in all different offices. So there's a lot of people who need, I don't want to say low budget, but speakers who don't demand a high fee to do a lot of educational meetings like that and doing it virtually. But, you make $2-3 grand for an hour, it's not a bad return, for a speaker. And you're at home, so a lot of times the price goes up because you're paying for the travel, you're paying for this speaker's time on the road. And now I think, people just recognize that virtual is an option. It's still a great way to do some things, but there is, still the desire to have big speakers, popular speakers, and dynamic speakers for events, because of course they're still hosting in-person events. Those didn't go away. They're back. There's, that industry I think has grown.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to today's episode of the Play Your Position podcast. As always, I am so grateful that you have decided to join me today. I'm especially excited today because I've got a great guest who is suited up and ready to take the field and lead us into his life journey, particularly the work that he's doing today, which he's going to share with us in a moment. His name is Blair Nichols, and he's coming to us from the mountains just outside of Los Angeles, California. Blair, are you ready for kickoff?
I am ready. Great to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. So I'm going to share, team, some things about Blair that are instrumental to who he is, and then he's going to fill in the gaps. Blair is the owner of BBN Creative Management for diverse and mission-driven talent. An expert in strategic speaking platforms, Blair guides speakers and business leaders through the nuances of public and corporate speaking. With a background representing top authors and managing diverse projects, he highlights the need for a varied portfolio for effective competition. Join us today, which you already have, Team PYP. You're so great. Blair is going to advocate for diverse and purpose-driven success in the speaking industry. And with that said, Blair, I know you have a ton to share with us today, but let's set the stage for Team PYP and have you tell us your leadership story. When did you first get the call to be a leader? What was going on in your life? And how has answering that call shaped what you do now?
Yeah, well, it's funny to hear this question and think about it just in general as a leader. I think from a young age, I was already kind of stepping out as a leader. When I think about my first job, I ended up on a committee. I was at the HarperCollins. I was in the HarperCollins Speakers Bureau, but working for HarperCollins Publishers. And me and about 4 colleagues are all around, in our early 20s. We're part of a steering committee that actually got to meet with the CEO and talk about different initiatives that we wanted to create and connect young editors with young agents and get more of the, young people connected within the company, because we're all siloed to different departments and different floors. And so it was interesting because I was doing leadership right away in my career, but like I mentioned, I was, involved in leading groups and clubs in high school and probably in middle school and in college, So leadership was always just kind of part of my DNA. My dad was a corporate leader and my mom was a teacher, but she was always involved in different organizations. It wasn't just the PTA. She was always involved in a couple nonprofits, involved at the church, and involved in being part of a community or a committee or something else that went beyond her day-to-day job. So I guess I kind of learned from their example to just stay involved and be active. And now I'm, on committees at my business school alumni board, and I'm part of a committee up here in Lake Arrowhead. And, so I guess leadership for me has just kind of been a default, and someone that enjoys stepping up and sharing ideas, and really, I think advocating for others. A lot of my leadership has come from that.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot, like trying to go back beyond high school, like earlier. When we first moved I grew up in the suburbs outside of Chicago. And when we first moved there, the neighbors next door, we met them, and their youngest daughter was deaf. She wasn't, 100% deaf, and she did deaf, and she had hearing aids, and, but her speech wasn't as clear as other kids. And, there was obviously challenges for her in that, but she and I became really good friends, and I would, participate in activities with her. And I almost became like her translator, and her, really making sure that she got heard everything, that she didn't miss anything, and that, made sure she was included. And it was just such an interesting relationship of someone that I just, happened to live next door to, and kind of grew to understand. Like, I could hear her clearly. Like, I knew what she was trying to communicate. If other people struggled, I could, like I said, translate. And now I work with speakers, and have been working with speakers my entire career. So it's just kind of interesting. From an early age, it was really my role, like helping others, find their voice, be heard, and, hopefully in the same vein, be able to express my values and ideas in that way too.
Yeah, I love that you added a piece to what leadership is that I've never heard in all the years I've been doing this show someone say it the way you did, which is leadership is about advocating for others. That is a beautiful, quality to have, that it's not just about the title or you're the one in front of the room, but it's really thinking about those who may not have a voice in the same way because of a number of reasons, whether it's, in the case that she couldn't hear, but any kind of disability, or what we label a disability in the normative structure. And I know language is changing all the time, and how we refer to people is changing all the time. My daughter reminds me of this constantly, and I'm glad. I like that your experience growing up with two parents who modeled leadership for you, just it became a way of being. Like, you didn't even, I've had guests who didn't see themselves as leaders because they came from homes where that really wasn't modeled. And it wasn't until later in life that they woke up one day and realized by circumstance, I'm a leader now, and what that means. And so here you are today, you are an advocate for people who want to have their voice heard in perhaps a bigger way or a different way. So bring us into the world of your work is with BBN. This is your business now, and maybe start with is there a typical day in the life of what you do? Are there some patterns that you notice? And then perhaps expand into how could listeners who might be interested in becoming speakers in various places, what does that look like today in a post-pandemic world?
Certainly. Yeah. I think we'll try to cover all that. And
I know. I'm sorry.
I know. Stack it up. I'm sure you'll prompt me though if there's anything
I will.
But kind of even taking off of your comment, one of my early bosses said speaking is an advocation, not a vocation.
Ooh,
so
stealing that.
You mentioned that I love working with diverse and mission-driven, purpose-driven talent, is because I've found through many years of working with many speakers is those are the ones that are truly A, the most successful, but B, the best to work with, because they have a reason for going out and doing it. The people who are doing it to collect a check, oftentimes celebrities, they don't want to be there. It's just a nice payday for them. Like, there are so many people who want to get their message out there. There are so many people who are driven and passionate about what they speak about, and they're driven by impact and that purpose. So I think starting out, I hope people figure out what is, maybe if they might already have that, hopefully I don't have to figure out what their purpose is, but I help them first figure out okay, now what is their unique differentiator? How are they, going to be the best messenger for this topic? And how do we bring that to the market and to the world to express something? Oftentimes, like you said, people don't imagine themselves as a leader, or they don't see the things on their resume as cool or interesting. Like, we all have a sense of imposter syndrome that everyone knows what we know, and there's 100 other people who are just like us or better. And people bring that into this thought around being a speaker. So helping them realize first what their unique qualities are, what are those cool things that they should highlight and that are buzzy, and so that we can position them, a little bit more exciting, than just what their topic is. And then it's about the topic. You might have an underlying message, or you might have like a purpose to deliver. But when you're just starting to think about crafting a talk, you're really only getting one idea across. So you're not trying to put a whole course into 45 minutes. You're not trying to get, a whole book's worth of information in a keynote. You're introducing this idea to an audience and hopefully leveraging that to invite them to go deeper with you. Maybe then they'll read the book. Maybe then, when we talk about building a strategy around your speaking, so many people just see speaking as the brass ring, the final stage. But that's not it, especially if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur. Speaking is just a vehicle for growing your business and expanding what you can offer. So many speakers I see are not doing this, where they're not really leveraging their corporate engagements to try to work with them as an ongoing consultant, or to scale their keynote into workshops or training or other programs, even digital. Nowadays, name of the game, if you live through 2020 and you don't want to see it happen again, then you can't rely on speaking revenue to be your only revenue.
Right.
So if that's the goal, then again, I think you want to reevaluate how you're doing that. So even from the very beginning, I help clients look at, okay, what can I be building alongside my speaking? Even if you're not out there doing a ton of speaking yet, okay, but being prepared for going on podcasts or getting in front of audiences, and then being ready to move them to your email list with maybe a quiz, an assessment, a free resource. Like, we've all, seen and heard and experienced free gifts and free gimmies. And it's lead collect. And you can do that for yourself. You can do that with your own speaking and build your email list, which in and of itself is an asset.
Yeah.
So then that email list is what enables you to then roll out other products or roll out digital courses, or just already have them and redirect people through your email funnel to what else you offer. They've seen you on stage, and now you have an individual relationship with them. Now, when they go to their next job, hopefully they're still getting your emails. It's really easy for speakers to make a big impression, but if there are people at our conference, they're not going to go find you right away on LinkedIn. And then by the time they get home, the reaction, emotion has faded, and maybe they forget your name all to begin with. I mean, that's a whole nother story, is how to make sure you make an impact. But if nothing else, this is your moment to capture them. And now I have clients who are getting 85% of their audiences to opt in. And then that just, adds more and more people to their list, more and more potential clients, people to book them for more speaking, or to join their communities or sign up for their coaching, or anything that you really are looking for. So helping people figure out their platform, what they really should focus their attention on, and then what type of audience maybe that should be. This is where I feel like a lot of people go wrong is how many times have I heard, well, I can speak to anyone, or my topic relates to every audience? Well, it's going to be a lot harder for you to grow and establish a platform if you have no narrow focus. Sometimes you need to start with a niche. Maybe it's the industry that you're coming from, and that's where you speak best because you truly understand healthcare or finance or whatever it may be. Maybe it's just in who you are targeting, you are figuring out specifically who you want to speak to. So if your goal is to be hired by companies to, do new corporate wellness program, then you got to figure out how you can be in front of HR professionals and business leaders. And maybe again, you might want to narrow it even further. So then we just think about speaking more strategically. When you get asked to speak and it's, maybe it's not a lot of money or it's kind of a hassle or it doesn't seem like it's a good opportunity because they're not offering you money. Well, can you look at that opportunity differently? And what could you negotiate with that event organizer because they're not paying you? There's going to be 500 people at the event. Okay, I want the entire contact list. Hey, don't need to worry about lead collect when you can get it for free and still pump out emails. Obviously, it's better if people opt in, but it might be something you can send out as a way to get people to choose to opt in. But there's just all different ways that this speaking event could be valuable to you. If you get one client from it, what is that worth to you? If you get two clients, most of the time, in knowing, these types of speakers and coaches and consultants, they charge more than $1 or $2, $3, $4, $5,000. So that speaking fee that you're, grasping for is pretty pointless when really your goal is getting those clients and getting the real product sold, which is you. And it might just be your one-on-one services to start. So then you can really start to evaluate and now, okay, I don't care. I would pay, and that might be an option to consider. You can be a sponsor of an event so that you get stage time, so that you can put yourself in front of those ideal clients. So now we just start to evaluate the economics differently of speaking. I don't focus on, hey, how do I start getting 5, 10, 15, 20K in the corporate speaking world? And that's it. Instead, how can I convert any audience into, an ROI that's greater than, that initial fee, or just help scale beyond that initial fee? And yeah, so that's a lot of kind of the strategy side of thinking about both getting started and what you should be building while you're doing it, so it is sustainable, so that it is pandemic proof, as we like to say.
Well,
and nothing really is, but at least you have diversity then, and then you've got passive income, and you've got all these different things going on. And speaking is a long tail. People will see you, and I've heard all the time, oh, I saw her 3 years ago, or my boss saw her 2 years ago, or I heard a podcast 6 months ago. These things stay out there. People do remember. It's up to you to try to stay in their world and stay in front of them, through your own marketing and thought leadership. But you also can't underestimate how often these leads may occur just down the road and kind of pop up out of nowhere, and it can continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, you just shared a lot of no, and it's good. It's good for people to hear that sometimes it's okay to take a speaking engagement that doesn't pay perhaps a big stipend. Maybe it pays, I've done speaking engagements for $250. I've done speaking engagements for free. And I always saw it as an opportunity, one, to practice what it is I talk about and how I add value to an audience. And I also saw it as some of the things that you described, an opportunity to meet people who down the road might want to work with me. And also that I think you've demystified what speaking really is. It's not the $20,000 keynote that gets, splayed across social media, or you hear about that famous person who commanded a 6-figure speaking fee. Well, guess what? They worked for 50 years to get that, right? Yeah. Because of, and they suffered a lot, because many people who are getting those kinds of payments, from my impression, have been public figures with a lot of tomatoes thrown at them, some personal issues brought out. I mean, it sounds like you're very down to earth and practical about what this really is. And that's encouraging to me. What is the state of the speaking circuit broadly today? Are organizations, corporations, nonprofits, and are they looking for people to come in and be inspirational or share some practical skill development? I mean, what is the state of the nation, I guess, the speaking nation from your
for sure. Yeah. And it hasn't changed too dramatically in my 17 years or so in the industry. but it has evolved a lot, obviously. So now, after the pandemic, virtual events are not the one dominant thing, of course, but they still exist. A lot of companies obviously saw how easy it was to, book a speaker maybe for an ERG or, an employee group that isn't the entire company, and they've got people in all different offices. So there's a lot of people who need, I don't want to say low budget, but speakers who don't demand a high fee to do a lot of educational meetings like that and doing it virtually. But, you make 2-3 grand for an hour, it's not a bad return, for a speaker.
Right.
And you're at home, so a lot of times like the price goes up because you're paying for the travel, you're paying for this speaker's time on the road. And now I think, people just recognize that like virtual is an option. It's still a great way to do some things, but there is, still the desire to have big speakers, popular speakers, and dynamic speakers for events, because of course they're still hosting in-person events. Those didn't go away. They're back. There's, that industry I think has grown. It's just, it kind of follows the market, it rises and falls with like the sense of economic stability that we have in our country or all over the world, and whether people are hosting these events or not. That was like 2009 was a terrible year for events, post-recession. And, these things kind of come in waves. So I think the state of the speaking industry is that there's more opportunities than ever because there's all these virtual opportunities that have come up, and there's more opportunities to just do it yourself. You don't have to go. You don't have to go and wait to be booked to get in front of an audience. You can host your own events, virtual or in person. And, if you want to sell products or services or coaching or other things like that, that's often the best way to go, is to have people on your stage, quote unquote, in your space and event, where you're going to, have a couple extra steps, to closing a sale or whatever when you speak on other stages. So I think there's more opportunities to kind of DIY, but that's also the downside. There's a lot more competition. When I started out, I was still sending DVDs to potential customers.
Yeah.
It was just on the cusp of like, oh, we have YouTube and digital videos, and like that changed a lot. And then that's changed how people can become a speaker, because before you had to almost be credentialized by a bureau, or you had to have your own materials like that. And you were, still pushing out the same stuff. And now it's so much easier for people to get a website, get video and pitch themselves. So I'd say, it's grown. It's just a bigger market now, on all sides. International is easier than it was before, but, it's a whole other kind of side of it. So
it's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Let me ask you a question about the credentials, right? So for many years, and especially in the 2010s, becoming a TEDx speaker was like the gold standard. Like if you could say, hey, I've been a TEDx speaker, it was a feather in your cap and kind of elevated a person to a different level. Also, there's the National Speaking, is it the NSA, the National Speakers Association, and you can join these, get these letters after your name or point to, well, I did this and that. I mean, how relevant are having those kinds of things to getting booked versus, like you just said, anybody can put up a YouTube channel, anybody can sit behind a mic and chat about something, day after day. Anybody can put up a website. And if I'm an event coordinator and I can't get someone like, say, Martha Stewart or whoever else, Snoop Dogg or somebody who's a big, well-known name out there. But I am looking to bring in, you use the word dynamic speaker, somebody who can educate, somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of a cutting edge trend, or has done something that audience is wanting to learn how to do. Like, are having those kinds of things important? Do they determine what you can charge? Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, all of the things like that can help, but
Okay.
they're not prerequisites anymore. Like it
Okay.
used to be that people thought you had to have a book to be a speaker. Now you don't have to have a book. Oftentimes people will come out with books way later after speaking for many years or not at all. But having a book would help. It gets people to know you and to see you as an expert in something. So this is where it's less about like, oh, do they have a TEDx video or do they have this credential or that credential? It's more like, where have they spoken? I can see on your website, like you put the logos of the companies or the organizations where you've spoken. Okay, that's credentializing. If you've been on media and you can show that, like that helps. Like, oh, they've been featured in Forbes or they've been on the Today Show or they've done this or that media. That's part of like kind of like your credentializing, the establishing yourself as someone relevant. And then really what your background is in relation to your topic. Like, does it make sense that you're a medical doctor talking about this? Or does it like, should you be a medical doctor to be talking about this? And why are you the one talking about this? As a very random example.
No, but
But
that's good because there's times I've seen that, like, I'm like, major disconnect here.
yeah, and you need someone objective to help you kind of understand how you might, be perceived when that may be the case. So all of that, I think, is less important than people finding out about you. So I think all of the things, if no one ever comes to your website, it doesn't matter how many letters you have after your name or how good your TEDx reel is or anything else, if like no one's ever coming to the website in the first place. So I think it's more important for speakers and thought leaders to be thinking about like, okay, I need to grow my social audience. LinkedIn is a great platform for speaking, but Instagram doesn't hurt either. It doesn't, like, people, however you can build more following, however you can keep growing that email list that again can set you apart, that could secure you a book deal in and of itself. Just having a large email list that the publisher's like, sweet, we're gonna, like, we already have a marketing channel like that. We know you'll probably sell X number of books given how many, subscribers you have. Doing all those things to get yourself just known, and doing media, contributing to Fortune and Forbes and Inc. and showing up in HBR, like however you're raising your profile, having a podcast, like being on other podcasts, that's what matters most, because most of the time you won't get a bureau's attention until one of their bookers or clients, whatever you want to call them, says, hey, have you heard of Mary Lou Kaiser? I want to book her. Do you represent her? Oh, sure. Well, we could book her. Yeah, we can get you Mary Lou. Now all of a sudden, like, this bureau is hitting you up and ask, hey, we have someone interested. What do you charge? Like, blah, blah, blah. And in the reverse, you can reach out to the bureaus, and it's difficult, but when you have all those assets and credentials, you don't have to wait for people to come to you. That's what you can be sending out too. So having a complete package is important if you're doing outbound. Thinking about how you're bringing new people in is what you should spend your time on when you're not actually speaking or delivering any of your products or services. Like, how can I get out there more? It's more the PR side. And I'm not a publicist. And so I love working with publicists because it really complements, the two sides of like rounding it out. So, I wouldn't neglect that.
Yeah. I like again, you have some really cool ways of describing what someone can do, raising your profile, and then the specific kinds of things. Listeners, I hope that you're taking notes. And if you're driving or you're walking or working out while you're listening to this, as I know many of us do when we're listening to audio, come back and listen to what Blair is saying, because if speaking as a part of your business is something that maybe you put on the back burner because of the pandemic, or maybe you haven't ever done it before, and now you're thinking, okay, we're looking ahead to the rest of the 2020s. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and business keeps rolling along, and people need to learn new things, and people need to be inspired. some of these things that Blair is sharing are really valuable, like focusing on raising your profile. And you used a word that I actually have on my banner in LinkedIn, which is the word contributor. How are you contributing to the conversation? Not just by blowing your own horn, which a lot of people do on social media. I'm sure you see it every day, Blair, where it's all about them all the time. This is, look at me and here I am and, oh, buy my stuff. Well, no, you want to be contributing in a way that is thoughtful and is reflective of what you bring to the conversation that could be valuable to someone else, right? Also, I also like the fact that you have shed light on the reality that it isn't so much about having the letters after your name or the fact that you had a TED Talk with 20 zillion views or whatever. Those are very few and far between. And from my studies, the ones that have those kinds of numbers did their initial talk before they even knew what was going on with YouTube or TEDx. Like, it wasn't the thing that it's become. And longevity is part of it too. So when clients come on and work with you, you help them think about their niche, their audience. What is it exactly you're talking about? And why would anybody care? Right? Because that's a big one, the so what clause, right?
Yeah.
Then what happens? Are you a matchmaker? Do you point them in directions of, hey, you might want to consider this over here? Or are you solely just helping someone get their part of their speaking arsenal together, and then you send them off and say, you've got it, now find the places that might want you?
Yeah. So the speaking arsenal or speaker package or speaker page or whatever you want to call it, that's step one of 3.
Okay.
So that's like the first month, let's say, because I usually start off with 90-day engagements and kind of go from there client by client. Stage 2 or step 2 is that go-to-market strategy. Okay. I've got this shiny new speaker package. Now what do I do with it? Focusing first on their low-hanging fruit, who's booked them in the past, who are their warmest connections, who can we really, maybe twist their arm to give you an opportunity that can help like grow that exposure. And now how do they just start pumping that out? Like, it becomes part of their regular activities, is including things in their newsletter, making direct outreach. They've got the package that they need, they've got the assets, so they can do that with confidence. And so, yes, we talk about other strategic ideas or ways and things that, maybe they're ready for an introduction to a specific bureau, or maybe they're, they need to look at very specific conferences and focus on that. So all of that kind of now in perpetuity, what should I be doing to keep this wheel a-turning? And then step 3 is that products and services piece. So great. Now I've got my speaker package. Now I'm booking events. I'm getting out there. How am I strategically going to convert this audience? Whether I just want to get them on the email list, whether, there are events where you can make a pitch, where you can say, you can go now to sign up for my course or my whatever, $4,000, whatever. There are many different types of events that people don't think about. It's not all corporate and not all paid. And there's a lot more of that kind of stuff than there is. I'm sure there is. Stuff.
Yeah.
And, you might find a lot of customers there. So then it's about, thinking about those products, services, what aligns for you, what really, and that almost kind of like has to be happening alongside step 2, because that kind of dictates what if you're going after a specific audience, or if you're putting more time or effort into your go-to-market towards that niche or that industry, et cetera. So if we don't have that figured out, that'll impact that. But then that really is kind of the longevity piece. This is what allows them to now not just keep talking about the work, but to keep doing the work, which makes them stay relevant. Maybe, they will have to write a book or another book, or they will have to evolve what they speak about, what they do, because, your time can run its course, or, one topic might fall out of favor or just kind of out of fashion. And I don't mean like it's like, oh, it's taboo. It's just, I want to really talk about that. Like, no one really talks about, like, maybe we don't talk about time management as much anymore. We don't talk about productivity. Like, there's different topics that are just more in the zeitgeist, and I can help in that sense too. But that kind of comes from like you really understanding like your value and who you want it to impact, how those products and services align to them. And I feel like that kind of takes away some of that uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. So great. So you have a 3-step process. It sounds like it's really complete and you address those big questions. It's not just about getting your speaker packet together, but really looking at where might you go? And then once you're there, what do you offer? Right.
Yeah.
And how do you do it in a way that's not, pitchy, right? Nobody likes to be blindsided by suddenly there's this, it feels like you've been, the bait and switch. And I know there's that conversation going on a lot right now about certain kinds of, online venues where you think you're going into something for one thing and it ends up not being that at all. It ends up being a pitch, and that's just not cool. And in fact, that's like the quickest way to lose business and trust. And I'll tell you, social trust is so valuable. And I think it was Stephen Covey that talked about, it takes years to gain the trust and like 5 seconds to lose it, and it's very hard to build back up once you've become known as fill in the blank. And also the word zeitgeist, I think, is good, that what was in favor, say, in 2018 to talk about may no longer be relevant because we've been through a pandemic and AI is here now taking over a lot of things, which ties into your word about productivity.
And to your point, like your daughter, pointing out how we refer to different types of people, we just don't refer to things like that. The language evolves. Like, I'm sure it comes from consultants, but it evolves.
It does.
So
it does.
You don't want to seem outdated by like putting all your eggs in. I'm this time management guy and no one's buying time management,
Right.
Is again,
you never want to put all your eggs.
Example.
Oh, no, but I'm sure you've seen it. And what comes to mind is, I think we are always evolving as humans, and constantly learning something new, and then sharing that is, I think, a strategy for speaking. You don't have to have done something for 30 years to then call yourself, well, now I can go in and speak to people. Well, guess what? I was a teacher in the 90s. I was a high school teacher. Teaching high school today, there may be some fundamental similarities, but kids are different because they've grown up with an internet world. The internet just arrived when I was teaching, and I can remember kids gathering around this giant clunky laptop, all pointing at, I'm like, what is this? And email was, rolled out. And so things are always changing. There are fundamental, human needs, obviously, but when it comes to speaking, I think what you're saying, Blair, is so wise. And again, Team PYP, I hope you're hearing this, is don't be afraid to evolve with the times, and you don't have to stick with what's been the tried and true, because maybe the tried and true just doesn't work anymore or resonate with anybody.
Yeah, and it's important, especially for your speaking topics, that you're not trying to create your own language. A lot of times, like people have their own clever words, or, maybe that's what will be revealed in the keynote. But if no one knows what that concept means, because it's like a word you've smashed together or a word you've created, or, a concept that isn't already like a common concept, really have to be intentional about how you name your topic so that the people who are looking for that will find it. Because they're not going to find the word that you created if no one knows it. If you write a best-selling book and that's the title, then you've got that brand, and that's great. And that's a great way to be known for something. But most speakers are they have ideas that they want to address, but you just have to position them in a way that the person that is gonna find it. And if people think I need some objective help sometimes with that, when they want to stand out and they want their topics to be unique. And I'm not saying call it like business development for dummies, but like
it's so boring and dry.
You still have to like get the main point across, even from the title. Because most of these people, they're going quick. They're looking, and they're searching, and they might do a Google search and click on a bunch of links, and they'll just look. And if you've they see that you've got what they're looking for, then they'll keep reading.
Yeah. So, in a minute or less, what are some top categories that are more timeless than others that are always in favor?
Yeah.
Shall we say?
Well, leadership,
and they're going to be dry. They're going to sound dry, but are some.
Leadership has always been the number one category. I don't
Has
think
it?
Be a surprise, because it really does, cut across all different industries. And, what if you think about the people who are usually being invited or treated to these types of corporate events, it is people that they are, seen as leaders, managers, high performers. So I'd say leadership. More broadly, culture, communication, there's always going to be something that relates to sales. Like if what you talk about relates to sales, it's pretty evergreen, and just kind of whatever the new positioning of that might be. Like now the hot thing is storytelling, and, talking in how that is so important to be embedded in sales, et cetera. And that's actually something that like in something you brought up earlier, is that's really the key to not feeling like you're just being pitched, is how you can actually connect to the audience through storytelling. So the framework that I really help people with in their talks is like beginning with a story, ending with a story. That pitch, that CTA, that, hey, here's this really cool thing. Your cool thing that you're offering them should be of value. Because like you said, if it feels like a bait and switch, that you're just being sold on something. But when you're giving something for free, or you're like, hey, take this cool quiz, all you got to do is scan, and then like that, and then you're still going to end with a story. I think a lot of speakers make the mistake of like, cool, I put the pitch at the end, and then everyone leaves feeling like, that was just one more infomercial.
Right.
You weave it in, and it's basically 3/4 of the way through. And then you end with another story that, reinforces your message and leaves them, either how you want them to feel. So that emotional side of it, I think, is what separates the big keynote speakers to people who are, get invited for the big slots, and the people who are subject matter experts and presenting on specific topics, but maybe they're not, adding that heightened element that really is what gets people's attention and makes you memorable.
Yes. Because it's how we feel. That's what, in my opinion, a speaker, that's that may be your number one goal. I don't want to say should, because I don't like that word as much. However, from experience as somebody in an audience, if I am moved by what I'm hearing, I'm going to remember that way more than someone that has a really great pitch deck up there, PowerPoint, or is delivering information because it's topical. Or I think, again, going back to my teaching days when we had to go to in-service days and we had to learn about the latest in classroom management, and, it's dry, and someone somewhere is ticking the boxes that, okay, we delivered that. But this emphasis on, when you speak, use stories as a means of connecting with your audience, having them feel something, they're going to be much more likely, one, to be, drawn to you and want to maybe get into your world. And not everybody's going to buy from you. That's just like reality. But you just never know who needs to hear what you're saying on that day, and it can change. So Blair, for people who would like to know more about you and these wonderful services that you offer, where do you hang out online?
Sure. Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn, Blair Bryant Nichols, and BBN Creative Management. And we're also both on Instagram. You should find me, Blair Bryant Nichols, and BBN Creative MGMT. And go to bbncreativemanagement.com and check out my services page. And I do free 30-minute consultations. And I think you'll get a lot of value and hopefully understand what your next step would be if you wanted to sign up for a call. So hope to see you on my calendar.
Yes. So team, the links to connect with Blair will be on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And I encourage you, whenever somebody offers their time, especially their time, because we can't get our time back, if speaking, or if you know somebody who's been talking about, I'd like to get out on the speaking circuit, and I really don't know where to start. I cannot recommend someone better than you, Blair, after talking with you for the last 50 minutes. This has been so just very inspiring and encouraging. And I can tell you know what you're doing, and you're realistic. And I like that. You're not making these big promises, but rather approaching this as one more part of your business, right? It's not the business, it's a part of the business. And I love that. And so, speaking of inspiration, share with us a couple of books that have inspired you on your leadership journey, or just on your journey as a human.
Yeah. Well, I spent a long time working with Keith Ferrazzi, and so Never Eat Alone, when I first read it really just made sense to me so much. And this, like, taking something so nebulous as like building relationships, like we're talking about, connecting with people, and actually having a formula to it, and and understanding kind of the man behind the book, and in that. I definitely learned so much in my time, both from absorbing the work and the content, and just like the brilliant ideas of how you can really optimize. Even if you're attending an event, you don't always, most of us are not speakers at the events. Most of us are attendees, and how you make the most of that and really connect with the people that matter to you the most, instead of just hope that you bump into someone that is interesting, So I learned a lot from him and from that book in particular. And I know he's had a couple since then. And the other one, I would say, I'm like going to look at my bookshelf, because
please
it's so
do.
hard for me. It's so hard, but Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's on my shelf behind me here.
It's just, it's like you said, it can be, to be a leader, to be an advocate, it can be scary. It can be lonely, and you're constantly in self-doubt around whether or not anything you're doing is making a difference. And I think what Glennon talks to in that, and just really owning it, and, pursuing what you're passionate about and being authentic and honest, it's what I admire most in speakers, who can get out there and be vulnerable and share, be real, with audiences, and people appreciate that more. You don't have to have the energy of Tony Robbins, or, jumping around everywhere. If you're authentic, you'll win, but, I'd say think about those stories too, like all the different books, but like so many different stories we absorb, and, sharing them is such a gift. So if you're afraid to tell your own stories in your talk, you can certainly get your same emotional points across telling another, some other person's story. But I would encourage you to tell your own, because you'll see how impactful and effective it is when you are doing probably the thing that makes you the least comfortable, because that's where people find, the real stuff.
100%. I just experienced that, and I can tell you, I was terrified to tell this one part. And after, everybody was like, I love that part. I'm like, okay, feedback. So that's great. Well, Blair, this has been wonderful. I have really enjoyed what you've shared today. I can tell you love what you do. I appreciate you taking us inside your leadership journey. And before we say goodbye, what's one last thing you'd like to leave listeners with that you didn't get a chance to talk about today?
Yeah, I always like to say speaking begets more speaking. So don't hesitate. You don't have to wait to have this perfect speaker package or all these assets or the right topics. Just get out there and try and volunteer, and, share something valuable at your school or your kid's school or your church or wherever it may be, because you never know who's listening and who might then, invite you to that next step that challenges you to take it to the next level. So get out there and speak.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.